come down one at a time. That's all.
I know. Yeah, I did it. Right. It was the whole afternoon.
Maybe we could do a little more like serious.
So it's like,
Yay!
Yeah. This is in the. It's a nice. Fabric. Yeah. You know, you have to. I do. I have to sign up. Yeah. It's so easy. Just tell them.
Hey!
Yes.
She is.
I did both. Yeah. Oh, yeah. What is it? Yeah, I sort of screwed this up. So, you know what they did?
Your list? Excuse me.
I love it tomorrow.
Yeah, well, yeah.
See if we can take this chords a little bit further. Any suggestions on that? Something like that, right? Hi, online people. We hope you enjoy. Did you do that?
Yeah, but not take it.
Perfectly right.
Yeah, but no, it's
Did you charity? Yeah, just a little for some reason, oh, I bought two creating a new one.
no, you're serious. You're serious.
Sure. Thank you. See if we can get actually one more quarter inch. So that's oh, never mind. Got it. Boom. Fantastic. Thank you, brother. Maybe on the fourth. Maybe just a little bit. I'm going up to just standard two. What Mars is first? Can I introduce it?
Yes.
Would you also like to? Can both? Do you let me in? Because I'd like to do something like briefly and then you want to take it over or vice versa. What would make you the happiest? Whatever makes you have the biggest smile on your face.
It's great to use, but like, I mean, I like, I hate
Say it again.
I'll go with whatever.
Let me say a little something about you first, Mars. Anything you want to share at that point?
Sounds great.
Cute.
Are these guys content ratings? Oh, and then we're gonna record. How do we record?
Howdy, everyone. We'll probably get started in the next about 3.5 minutes or so. But I will say we don't charge extra for front row seats. So if I can convince anyone to scooch a little closer, by all means, bring it in because we'll have some other friends flooding in.
Where are you gonna be first? Are you gonna be up here or?
Yeah. Here.
So should we move this back?
Oh, this is for our online friends, yeah?
Yes.
Or maybe even just yeah, maybe slightly sideways. I'm not sure. Or keeping it here
Floor.
and then just go like this.
Okay,
But then Mars is I guess we kind of get it.
and then swish.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Alright.
It's better than I can.
Are you comfy here? Comfy, for sure.
I know.
You can play Jenga.
Maybe we get the good blocks a little bit more.
Yeah, you got the thoughts.
It is. It's true. Right. Yeah.
Can we have everyone just stand up for one moment, please? Just if you could stand up just for a second. Say hi to your neighbor real quick. Say hi as we get started. And as we are, hey, you're too happy, calm down. As we're getting started here, I'm just gonna ask everyone, if you see an open seat in front of you, go ahead and grab it, otherwise grab your chair and bring it a little bit closer.
Oh, what's up with the barricade?
The barricade is, it is gonna explode if you chant loud enough, actually. Yes.
Yes.
Word.
This was on, right? How weird. Oh, goody, goody. Strange. Very, very strange.
Somebody's blood must be out.
Maybe it's just.
I've been thinking why. You just
Oh, no, because it's connections coming through.
shorter?
Yes. Absolutely.
I mean, you'll be nice. Oh, that's the wrong place.
Baroque here.
Okay, I'm not late.
Well, welcome to Veda Yoga. We're just starting with a deep heart of gratitude for Kumi and the Veda Yoga friends for creating a space like this. And so we'll start with you just putting your hands together like this and bowing with gratitude. But there's something we also call a Vedic applause, which is a lot more fun. A clap. So everyone can put your hands up like this. This is the antenna arms, because we're dealing with spiritual sound. Right? And there's the Vedic applause, which we'll express with gratitude. Repeat after me. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Let's give Kumi and Veda a big Hari Bol. Also, bringing as much gratitude as possible for. I'm personally beyond excited for tonight because not only do we get to hear from H.D.Goswami, who has a long list that if I were to say the whole bio, I would happily do it, but it would take much longer than the whole
Don't stop.
program. Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
And, but personally, he's been one of my biggest inspirations and teachers over the last 15 years or so. And what I attribute any critical thinking skills I have to what I've learned from H.D. Goswami. And you are in treat for tonight, because worst case scenario is you learn a little something, best case scenarios, you change your life forever. You guys okay with that? Mm-hmm. Give me a head bobble if you're.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. So we're just gonna hand out some mantra cards for the main mantra we'll be chanting tonight. Raise your hand if you've done Kirtan before. You can take one and pass it down. Okay, that's clear. Good. So you guys have drank the Kool-Aid. We're gonna keep it. We're gonna go deep. We're going to chant some simple Maha Mantra Kirtan. Since you all know Kirtan, we'll keep it relatively short in terms of the explanation, because you can talk about how good honey is all day, but until you actually eat the honey, that's really where the magic happens. So what we're going to do here is we're going to chant with our full intentions, and if your mind wanders, we're going to kindly ask you to leave, okay? No? Okay. You're also supposed to laugh. Go ahead. Let's try one more time. If your mind wanders. Okay. So what we're going to be doing here is chanting really loud with our full attention, and just watch what happens. H.D. Goswami will be sharing some amazing words of wisdom with us to allow us to enter into the Kirtan tonight. So please give your full attention not only to him and him allowing us access into these ancient mantras, but also to the actual mantras that we're going to be chanting. Deal? Okay. Would you like to start with some Kirtan? Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. So let's. So we'll start with some invocational mantras. Maybe we can just gather our voices with the mantra of Om together. Please everyone take a deep breath in, very loudly. Om. Now we'll chant invocational mantras. As you listen to these mantras, if you know, please chant along. If you're unfamiliar, just feel as much gratitude as you can possibly muster in your heart as we're chanting these mantras of gratitude for our gurus, our teachers. Krishna Krishna Shivate Saraswati Gaurava Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasa Krishna Chaitanya Shri Advaita
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Everyone together from your ancestors. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
That was the warm up. You guys feeling warmed up? This is magical. So even though this thing typically doesn't stop, for those of you who know me, but when I'm in the presence of H.D.Goswami, I shut up and I listen. And I encourage you to do the same.
I'm a bully.
And I will just say, before I hand over the microphone, don't mind me saying, is about 15 years ago, when I was interested in spiritual life and I was learning about different spiritual cultures, I had heard a lot of things. Some of it was just frankly weird. You ever heard a weird thing? Any ever heard a spiritual person say something weird? No, just me? Say I. Blink twice. Okay. So, and I remember actually by providence opening up my phone and Googling something. And I just so happened to listen to a class that seemingly answered every question I had about spiritual life in about a 40-minute span of time. Later, to randomly find out it was H.D.Goswami who really started my spiritual path. I would say my real spiritual path, my authentic spiritual path. And so, with as much gratitude in my heart, I'm really excited to hear what you have to say with us. Of course. Let's welcome Lurs with a big applause. Howdy go! That was adorable. Not like you mean it. 1, 2, 3. Howdy go!
So is it game time?
It's game. You tell me.
Yeah.
Are you ready? Party?
Kirtan.
Okay. Thank you very much. Very kind of you, very generous, and thank you all for coming. So I think topic Kumi is Kirtan, right?
The meaning of Kirtan.
Meaning of Kirtan. Okay. Start with the dictionary. Sanskrit is this
amazing language. In fact, just a word and phrase of Sanskrit from, because what we just chanted is Sanskrit, and the word Kirtan is a Sanskrit word. Today, I mean, for the last few hundred years, we have an academic field in the West and around the world called linguistics, which involves, morphology, phonology, and everything, language. So, the academic field of linguistics arose when European scholars discovered Sanskrit. Because unlike, for example, our language, in fact, that's what the word Sanskrita means. Sanskrita means very well formed. And so, for example, take our alphabet. A is actually a vowel, diphthong vowel. B is a labial with a long, anyway. But what I mean to say is our alphabet is completely chaotic. Like if you look at phonology, sounds, like you have vowels, you have, labials, gutturals, and palatals, and everything, basic linguistics. So the Roman alphabet is total chaos in terms of phonology. The Sanskrit alphabet, if you see the Sanskrit alphabet, it's actually a phonology chart. It's completely scientific. So thousands of years ago, many thousands of years ago, Panditas, or one of the ways they said scholars back then, they had a completely scientific, scholarly understanding of language, how language is formed, and so on. So in this thoroughly scientific approach to language, so why did they do that? Because they knew that sound was so important. Because sound actually can liberate. And so, and they had the Vedas, and they had the auxiliary literature, Itihasa, Purana, Panchamo Veda Uchate. They had these great ancient stories and philosophies, the Upanishads, and so on. And so, because they understood that literally our lives depended on understanding these texts, and the usual word for an authoritative text in Sanskrit is Shastra. We sometimes say scripture. So, because literally our lives depend on understanding the Vedas, they really wanted to get it right. And so they created the scientific field of linguistics many, many thousands of years ago, when in Europe, the official explanation of why we have different languages is the Tower of Babel. So, I mean, I don't want to put that down. It's a very interesting story, but the Tower of Babel, where God created different languages because people were trying to build a tower that could reach heaven without piety, without devotion. You could just sort of take the elevator up to heaven. So then God suddenly made everyone speak a different language, and they couldn't communicate, and the construction stopped. So that's where we get the word babbling, because in the Tower of Babel, when everyone spoke different language, everyone else sounded like Babel to whoever spoke a different language. And so it's a very interesting story. It's beautiful in its own way. It may not be rigorous historiography. So in India, they had this complete scientific approach to language because it's so important. Your life, your eternal life depends on mantras and the shastras and so on. So in that language, they also had the concept of language being something literally organic, in the sense that there are roots, which they call dhatus. These are linguistic roots. So for example, for the word kirtanam, which is the actual, kirtan is sort of a modern abbreviated Hindi form. The actual word is kirtanam. And so it literally grows out of a root, which is kirt. So every word, because they had this concept that every word ultimately is describing some kind of action. Even if you say peace, peace is a state of being which requires maintenance and effort to be peaceful. And so because he had this notion that the world is in motion and we are doing things, and even when we are in states of existence, which they would call a bhava, a state of being. That's the be in the English word be is the Sanskrit be in bhava. And so on. I don't want to get too technical here, but so therefore they envision language as growing out of roots. And so you have roots, and then you have a stem, and then it flowers into actual words used in sentences and expressions and so on. So the root is kirt. And then you have kirtanam, which means to glorify, to praise. And so if you just think about the root of the word kirtanam, it's obviously the solution to all our problems. Because all of our problems grow out of one big mistake, which is we think we're the center of reality. Which, I mean, obviously would not stand up to any type of empirical test. And so, I mean, it's obviously delusional. Because if you just look at a picture of Earth from a satellite or something, we are all very tiny. And so in our more lucid moments, we realize that we're not the center of reality. And when we realize that, it's a great relief. We can actually be happy. We can focus on other things. We're not self-conscious. We're not in anxiety. We're not trying to impress other people. We're not showing off, in a room filled with 50 other people who are also showing off in a sort of battle of the egos, which kind of describes my social life in high school. So therefore, the very word kirtanam, or kirtan is sort of abbreviated form in modern Indian languages, is the path to freedom. Is because the more we accept that we're just tiny souls, we're important, we're not insignificant, but we're just tiny souls. The more we understand that, the more space you have in your consciousness for reality. And if I'm self-centered, and the Sanskrit word actually, the way they would say that, by the way, the word ego comes from Sanskrit. It's a little historical linguistic treat for you, because I'll just explain that very quickly. That all the European languages except Basque, Finnish, and Hungarian, I mean, all the Germanic languages, Slavic languages, Latin-based languages, Greek, Hittite, by the way, if anyone's a Hittite fan, and they're all Indo-European languages. So, so what happens is that a Sanskrit H tends to become a European G. I'll give you a few examples. The word for vehicle, which is from Sanskrit, by the way, the word vehicle, is Vahan. Hindi, that word Vahan. And so if you change the H to a G, you get Vagan, as in Volkswagen, or our English word wagon. So that's Sanskrit Vahan, so it's H to G. Or another one is, actually an interesting one is, you've heard of the Magna Carta. Magna, from the Greek means magnificent, to magnify something, to make it bigger. And so if you change the, again, that's Sanskrit Maha, like Maha Kirtan or Mahabharata and so on. So if you just change the H to a G from Maha, you get Magna. And I mean, we go on, there's lots of things. I mean, English is full of Sanskrit, by the way, if you know where to look. It's full of, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of words. So here's an interesting one, then I'll get to ego. And this was actually, I remember when I was at Harvard in graduate school, our professor was very well known Sanskritist, said that actually you take the English word, the Sanskrit word huta. Huta means like an offering, from the verb hut, offered. And so you offer, of course, to God. So huta means the one to whom you offer. And so if you take the huta, and that's where you get words like hotra, name word like Agnihotra, it's the same root. So if you take the word huta, just change the H to G, you get the German Gott, and the English word God, which is interesting. So back to the ego. The Sanskrit word for I, just the first person singular pronoun, is aham, like ahankara, means false ego, means like I-ism. And so if you take the word aham and change the H to G, and of course in Greek, you don't pronounce an initial H, like in the word honor or hour. What hour is it? And so from aham, you get ego, H to G. Anyway, now we'll go back to a regular program. But that was just a little, so the word ego is just the Greek first person pronoun, I, and it comes from the Sanskrit first person singular pronoun, aham. And so ahankara in Sanskrit, literally making I, just like you want to push yourself forward. Kara, by the way, also is in English, which means doing, making, kar, words like creation, increase, and so on. But anyway, so let's get to the philosophy. So kirtan is to glorify. So if I'm really doing kirtan, in other words, we can just, make music and call it kirtan. But if you take the word literally, it means you're glorifying someone and hopefully not yourself. As we know, because let's say if you're a good singer, like you're really good at this, singing, playing the instrument. So, but I know you're also a very sincere spiritual practitioner. But everything in this world offers an opportunity to be stupid. So, even so, let's say, for example, someone who's doing kirtan, they can be, showing off their lips. They can be, I sing really well. I'm not saying that any of you would do that, but there is the opportunity. And so if we're really doing kirtan, not just in name only, if we're really doing kirtan, we're trying to glorify someone else. And the person we're trying to glorify is the source of our existence. Now, it occurred to me, or God, if you didn't have a traumatic experience in your childhood religion, then it's okay to say the word God. So, Vedanta, which is sort of the culmination of sort of sophisticated philosophical theology in the Vedic tradition, begins with Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Interesting, Yoga Sutras also begin with the word Atta Yoga Anushasana, which means, so Atta means like, okay, now I'm going to do this. So in the Vedanta, it begins Ataha, now therefore, Atato Brahma Jigyasa, the search for, or research, actually, literally, research into the absolute truth. Because, for example, when we were younger, there was a truth to our body. When you're young and you do this mirror on the wall thing. And so, so the body, fortunately, it's funny when you're young, you kind of get attached to your body. When you get to my age, you're like highly motivated not to identify with your body. So, Atato, this is how Vedanta begins. Atato Brahma Jigyasa, now the search for, the attempt to understand absolute truth. Because when I was younger, I thought, well, the absolute truth is that, I look good. And I was able to convince, my mother of the same thing. She agreed. So, the great sages have asked, why begin a book with now then? Because this knowledge, this spiritual knowledge, is for people who have understood that I'm never going to be fully satisfied. I'm never going to experience perfect love in the game of, sort of like the ego Game of Thrones. You go to a party when you're a kid and everybody wants to sit on the throne. And so kirtan is the way to escape ignorance. It's a way to escape suffering. It's a way to pursue spiritual liberation, precisely because you're glorifying someone else and not yourself. And you're doing it sincerely. Now, I wanted to say a point. This is a very crucial point, actually, philosophically. It's sort of, if you look at philosophical theology, which means not just people have a credo or, this is our dogma, but philosophical theology, which is, it means that it's an academic field. It means that you're talking about spiritual things. You're talking about souls or God or whatever, but you're doing it with some philosophical rigor, with some, discipline. You understand basic principles of logic. You understand when someone is being coherent and when they're not being coherent, when they're contradicting themselves, when they're claiming something is true, but they haven't actually demonstrated how it's true, and so on. So that's philosophical theology. And it's very important. Unfortunately, in the West, we got trapped in this sort of miserable dialectic of thesis and antithesis, because for many, many centuries, you had this really brutal religious fanaticism. If you look at the, even before the fall of the Roman Empire, when Constantine declared that there would only be not only one religion in the empire, but you had to have one interpretation of the one religion. And so before Constantine, there were many different interpretations of Christianity. And, not a big deal if you didn't agree with that, although the government would kill you. Nothing personal, but even if you preached the wrong kind of Christianity, you would be killed. Anyway, then the Roman Empire fell not too long after Constantine. He didn't live to see that. And Europe kind of degenerated into all these clans, like tribal warrior clans. It got pretty bad. And so the person that kind of restored civilization to Europe was named Charles the Great, or as we know him, Charlemagne, which means Charles the Great, the Latin languages. So, but the way he did this is, it kind of set the tone, kind of set the beat, was that if you didn't, because he was dealing with all these Germanic tribes, they were heathens, they were pagans, and so on. Actually, paganism is very interesting, but just very quickly, if you look at Roman and Greek pagan religion, it's actually Mediterranean Hinduism. But that's a whole other topic. So, but the way he enforced this is that he said that you had basically two choices, you and your tribe, you and your Germanic tribe, the Visigoths and the Saxons and all these people, that you could either suddenly see the light and become sort of a Charlemagne type Christian, or you could die. Your choice. So a lot of people actually chose to become Christian. And of course, some of them didn't. And then, but what I mean to say is, this kind of coercive sort of fanatical religion, it didn't exist in India. If we look everything we know about the history of ancient India, which includes reading the actual sacred texts, like the oldest one, the Rig Veda, it includes reading a book about India written about 2,300 years ago by a Greek ambassador to India named Megasthenes. There were Chinese pilgrims, Buddhist pilgrims, that came to India and took notes and wrote down what they saw. So all the evidence we have is that India was enlightened, open-minded, total freedom of religion state. Complete freedom of religion, sort of the opposite of Europe. But dialectically, because Europe went to this extreme, and then you get, and I swear to God, I'm going to end European history here, but it's just because it's actually leading to an important point. It's we have certain attitudes, and there's a reason we have those attitudes. We were born, most of it, Western civilization. We have certain ideas and attitudes like this is good, that's not good. We don't know why we have this attitude, but there are historical reasons for it. And if you discover the historical reasons for your attitude toward religion or toward God, why you feel a certain way, then you kind of become free to make a rational choice instead of just being conditioned, sociologically conditioned by this ancient past. So I'm going to mention one last thing in European history because it was just incredibly awful. And I want to get your attention by talking about very awful things. And that was the 30 Years' War. Raise your hand if you lose sleep at night over the 30 Years' War. Okay. It was from 1618 to 1648. It was because there was, Martin Luther, the Protestants against Catholics, and finally came to a big showdown, the equivalent of the OK Corral in, Europe. And they were, and for 30 years, 1618 to 1648, they were at war. And the war was centered kind of in central Germany and all the countries around there. It was so brutal. It was so cruel. It was so just unspeakably horrible that it basically traumatized the Western world. It traumatized the Western world. And meanwhile, I mean, it's still kind of lingering. And so at the same time, exactly at the same time, literally, something else was happening, namely the scientific revolution. And so Europe made this big shift that actually it's not religion that's going to make intelligent people happy. It's getting rid of this monstrous fanaticism and just being scientific and rational. And eventually, of course, they took over the universities, which is why we have the kind of universities we have today. The reason I mention all this is because we are all children of these traumas. It's not that you personally watched a movie in the 30 Years' War and got traumatized, but it's just the way people around you talk, the way your professor spoke, the way religions conduct, everything. We actually inherit historical traumas. And so therefore, dialectically, things went to the other extreme. Because the pendulum effect, or Newton's third law of motion. Every force in the universe creates an equal and opposite force. Or the dialectic of Hegel, thesis, antithesis, and on and on. And so the antithesis, the thesis, the antithesis of religious fanaticism is fanatical religious relativism. Fanatical religious relativism. In other words, not that because people are very serious and they study and they read and they think and they philosophize and they conclude that no, it's all relative. It's just that's the ante to get into the game. If you don't agree in many circles that any claim about some spiritual truth is relative, there is no highest truth. It's just everyone has their own truth. Unless you do that, you're basically considered to be uncivilized. But that position itself is equally fanatical and equally irrational as the thing that caused it. Because if everyone has their own truth, no one has a truth. I mean, the only place where people really have their own truth is an insane asylum. For example, I could say my geographical truth is that right now we are on the island of Bali, where a good friend of mine is actually right now doing an Ayurveda clinic. Anyway, so no, you can't have your own geographic truth. If you did have it, you wouldn't be in this program. You never would have found your way here. If you're sick, you can't have your own. I mean, there are objective facts in the world, and so we have this collective narcissism where truth has been democratized. Whatever you think is true for you. What does that mean? I mean, how could it be true for you and not true for everyone else? Right now, if I'm in Los Angeles, you are too. And if you are in Los Angeles, I am. So what's happened is that rather than say we don't want fanatical religion, what we really want is just to be reasonable. And we can build on things. That's why science advances, because people build on what someone else did. They discuss. If someone makes a weak argument, it's refuted, and then you move on to stronger arguments. You can't make progress in any field of knowledge if you have fanatical relativism. You can't make progress in science. You can't make progress in history, historiography. You can't make progress spiritually if you just buy into this absurdity that everyone has their own God. I mean, what is God? It's like a little trinket that, it's like my good luck charm or something. So therefore, getting back to, one last point, gets directly to Kirtan. You got the scenic route, but it's not that, because of my age, I actually forgot what I was talking about 10 minutes ago. What was I talking about 10 minutes ago? Anyway, so the thing is, now we get to one of the biggest, there are great debates that have been going on for thousands of years. One great debate, which I'm going to speak on, and I'm a keynote speaker at an academic conference in Gainesville in January. So the great debate between theism and atheism, or physical knowledge and metaphysical knowledge. But even if you study history of world religions, and we're talking about Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, every major religion in the world had a great debate, a great philosophical debate, and it's relevant to Kirtan. The great debate was, right now I'm a person. Is that real? Am I really a person? Or when I become enlightened, do I just become some kind of thing or some kind of energy? And of course, this is inseparable from the idea, the source of my existence, where I come from, ultimately. Is it personal or impersonal? Is language, can language be ultimately meaningful? Or when you're enlightened, is language just irrelevant and babbling? And you've gone beyond language to some ineffable, unthinkable truth. And you find this debate in every major religion. And so the argument I want to give here is that the reason we take the impersonal path seriously, which is not the gold medalist here, the reason we take the impersonal path seriously is because we are so disappointed with our own personal life. In other words, if you experience your personal life, including your internal life and your external life, your private life and your public life, if you just experience life as wonderful, full of amazing possibilities, sure, sometimes I make mistakes and pay for it, but the point is, there's no limit to what I can become. There's no limit to the expansion of my consciousness, that love is unlimited. But maybe I've had some bad relationships, like who hasn't? And so, and yet there is perfect love. That's the true romantic. Maybe I didn't do it right. Maybe the other person wasn't worthy, but there is such a thing as perfect love. And there is such a thing as supremely beautiful, meaningful language, and so on. And therefore, what keeps winning out is the idea that there's some kind of personal, absolute truth. And that's what Kirtan's all about. It's not impersonal. It's when you fall in love. When you fall in love, you want to talk about the person you've fallen in love with. You know, if it's safe to do so in various environments. I remember when I was in high school, you could always tell who had a crush on who, because just look at their notebook and see what they're writing. Or see the way they kind of get a little giddy around another person. And so so the message of Kirtan is, don't give up on perfect love. Because without love, anyone here know the song Alfie, Dionne Warwick? Without love, you're nothing, Alfie. Great song, isn't it? Glad someone here. Without true love, you're nothing, Alfie. And so life culminates in perfect love and pure love. That's really why we exist, to experience perfect love. And we shouldn't give up on it. And so going down the impersonal path, what Krishna says in the Gita, chapter, at the beginning of chapter 12, I think. Kleshodi katanas tesham abhyaktas saktachitasam. That the impersonal path is very troublesome. It's difficult because you're trying to pretend you're not a person. And what we find is, like so many, great yogis, gurus came to America teaching the impersonal path. Unfortunately, almost every one of them got a little too personal with their young, beautiful female followers. I guess impersonalism was for some other one. So, and that gets to language. So when you're glorifying someone, it's like, let's say you're getting to know someone, a relationship is forming, it looks like this could really be it. But then you tell the person one day, actually, I'm really looking for something higher, but you'll do for the meantime. Bye. Unless you've really got like an incredible needy person, that's the end. You know, or someone says to you, if you say, do you love me? For now, I mean, you're the best I've got for now, but I'm certainly, you know, still shopping, and I kind of feel that there's something better coming. So, how to win friends and influence people. So it's so obvious that there is a personal absolute truth. And if you have that attitude, sure, I can, you know, kind of do prayers and everything until I, you know, outgrow this. Everywhere, here's some evidence that there's ultimately some supreme personal absolute. Anywhere you look in the universe, literally, you can look in the Webb telescope, you look at galaxies, you can look at it 1 grain of sand. And what you find everywhere is art. Art. Look at the galaxies, they're artistic. Look at the cell, look at grains of sand. If you look at magnifying grains of sand, they're like jewels. They're like all these multicolored jewels. Everywhere you look. Not only that, if we look at evolution, I'm not taking it, I mean, just take evolution sort of in a neutral sense. We won't talk about why there's evolution. But if you look at evolution, the more evolved someone becomes, the more personal they become. I mean, have you ever met a snail with a really good personality? Of course, we've met people who probably never, they don't, snail probably have better personalities than some people we've met, but I mean, generally, the more evolved someone is, like if you meet someone and they're not in some fastidious or phony way, but they're genuinely personal with you. They're not just, it's not a show. They're not trying to sell you something. They're not trying to get their hands on you. It's just someone who's really personal and nice and genuinely cares about you. We consider that person to be more evolved than someone who, you know, is impersonal, rude, uncaring, narcissistic, and so on. So, and this evolution toward the personal is going on and on and on, as high as we can see on this planet. What about, you know, one of my, you know, personal buddies, Immanuel Kant? That's a joke. Anyway, he's a German philosopher. I'll resist the temptation to tell you what I really think about Kant. But anyway, he did say one thing which is really interesting. And it is saying a lot for him, because it kind of, in his attempt to save metaphysics, he practically almost destroyed it in Western philosophy. But anyway, he said that we have built into us a moral intuition, so that you know what's right and wrong. And if someone, let's say, is acting immorally, we see that person is somehow deficient, or they've been bewildered by their own ego, by their own narcissism. People that cannot personally, sincerely care about other people have a psychological disorder. And so why is it we live on a planet, in a universe where there's art everywhere, where we have built-in moral instincts, where the more someone is empathetic, the more someone is kind, the more someone is loving, the more we consider that person to be highly evolved. If the ultimate truth was impersonal, we'd think the opposite. We'd think the less personal someone was, the colder they were, the more uncaring they were. Because you're not really a person anyway. I'm not going to be personal with you, because that would just be, what's the word? You know, just feeding your illusion. I would just be, you know, encouraging you in your illusion to think you're a person. Our deepest intuitions, the nature of the universe, the fact that all these things indicate that we are ultimately persons and another person made the universe. This is not anthropomorphism. You know, the anthropomorphism, it's like, I mean, who was that guy, kind of the what's his name? Forgot his name, Greek philosopher, who thought he was being incredibly clever when he said that, he said it's just all anthropomorphism, we imagine, of course, he was talking about polytheistic gods. But how do we know that? I mean, the Bible says we're made in God's image. And so, why is it obvious that we're not? After all, human beings are the only creatures that we know of on earth that can understand the concept of God. I mean, your dog may be incredible, but your dog's not going to do theology. So, anyway, if you just put all the pieces together, and ultimately if you say that there's just the one, everything is one, but it's also different. For example, we're all one as a group, but we're individuals. Words have different letters, but it's one word. Everywhere you look in the universe, you see one and different, not just one, not just different. So we do kirtan, get right back to kirtan. So we do kirtan, we're cultivating pure love. We're trying to transcend our egos. We're trying to learn to really love. And not just love when you possess something. Like, you know, I was very fortunate, I had wonderful, loving parents, but you know, if they didn't think these are my kids, these are our kids, I mean, there's something about love in this world that it's almost inseparable from the sense of possession. Like, now you're mine, I'll make you mine. And if you're not mine, then I probably don't love you as much. Or I may not love you at all, or I may actually shoot you. You know, crime is a passion. So, you know, what's that song, Hey Joe, where are you going with that gun in your hand? So the ability to love totally without any possessiveness is only, it's a privilege for those who are self-satisfied. Because let's say it's a feast, there's a table, but let's say you're full, you had a great meal, you can say, no, please, you take it, because you're satisfied. If you're starving, you know, and someone's taking all the food, it's like, excuse me, you know, I don't want to be rude, but so kirtan is meant to fill us with pure love, which gives you the luxury, the privilege, the joy of loving others without wanting to possess them. No demand. You become free to actually love. And that's real happiness. And no one can hurt you because you don't need them. I mean, the essence of a perfect loving relationship is not, well, I need you and you need me. That sounds more like a contract or, you know, a deal. So that's what kirtan is. And last thing I'll say, and then we'll open it up for adulation, donations. That was a joke. Just kidding. And that is, you know, I mean, consider this. Let's say you have a light, like a flashlight or some kind of light. If you aim it into a box, the light can't expand. If you aim that same light out into the universe, it can go millions and millions and millions of miles, and it can expand by millions of miles. You can't artificially love someone more than they're lovable. You just can't do it. And so, I mean, there's philosophical love. Okay, I recognize you're an eternal soul. I love you as a soul. That's all good. But in terms of an intimate, personal relationship, if you love someone that's infinitely beautiful, your love expands infinitely. And really, when it comes down to it, what other real happiness is there except being in love? I mean, that's what really makes everything else interesting. And so, if you give your love to an infinitely attractive person, infinitely attractive, your love expands infinitely, your pleasure expands infinitely. And that's really the meaning of the famous Vedanta verse, Anandamayo Gyasat. You become filled with bliss by practicing that love. So that's what kirtan is. We're practicing the art of love. And so if you know who you're trying to love, it helps. Because you can't just love the philosophical unknown. I mean, how do you say, well, there's something out there, how do you love it? You can be in awe of it, maybe. But love means you get to know somebody. It means you get to know them very well. It means that person becomes the most important person to you. And there's trust. And imagine meeting someone, and for the next million years, you just keep admiring them more and more, as opposed to what usually happens. You know, it's like, anyways, the art of ignoring certain things, you know, keeps relationships together. So, but if there's this infinitely beautiful, it's like, because falling in love, I mean, you know, I had my moments. I was not impersonal when I was in high school and college. And so when if you think about it, when you're discovering love, you get to know someone that interests you, the person's, you know, attractive or attractive enough. And that you get to know this person, is like, to your great shock and surprise, they're not a hypocrite. And the person really does have all these qualities, and the person really understands you and still loves you, despite understanding you. And so, but what happens in the material world is that sooner or later you get to know the person. And then it's not that you necessarily leave them or don't love them, but it's, you know, I've heard all the jokes like 1,000 times, and you're kind of predictable because I've seen you in the same situation 1,000 times, and we still love each other, but it's, you know, it's not absolutely thrilling every day. Whereas when you fall in love with someone who's infinitely beautiful, infinitely good, every day of your life, forever, you're falling in love. Never disappointed, never cheated. And that ecstasy of really falling deeply in love, and the other person is not cheating me, is reciprocating. The other person is falling in love with me. And this goes on forever. That's actually what the spiritual world is. It's an eternal falling in love, more and more and more. And there's no end to your pleasure, because your pleasure is coming from something infinite. And that's Bhakti Yoga. And Kirtan is quintessentially a technique of Bhakti Yoga. It can be used by the impersonal schools, but they're kind of, you know, well, forget what our philosophy is, let's just enjoy Kirtan. But in Bhakti Yoga, there's no difference between your philosophy and how you're really living. You can't really live impersonally. It's like, for example, even this famous atheist philosopher, his name is John Searle, has been in Berkeley forever. One of the most well-known philosophers of our times, which, anyway, no sarcasm. So, he's an atheist, but he even admitted, actually, he wrote a book in which he admitted that, I guess that's just my religion. Because you can't prove atheism. The very idea of proving it is actually philosophically absurd. But he was making the point that there really is nothing but matter, physical things, and the law and the laws of matter, then there couldn't be free will, because everything is just caused by the laws of physical laws. But he said the problem with saying there's no free will, which some not very bright philosophers say, the problem is, as he said, you can't live that way. It's a so-called truth. You can't live. He gave the example. You go to a restaurant and you've been there for a while, the waiter comes and says, could you order? You can't say, I'm just waiting for my neurology to order, because I have no free will. I mean, no one can live that way. Anyway, I'm deeply involved in the whole philosophy of this at an academic level, but I won't torture you with it. But so we do have free will, and that's what we can love. So anyway, so Kirtan, that's what Kirtan is. It's practicing how to love. Because if you can do Kirtan and not just, and really not just try to enjoy it, but you're really trying to give your love to the person whose names you're chanting, that's when you really advance, that's when you really start to take off spiritually. So, I guess I'll stop here for now for those of you who feared that this might go on interminably. So, any questions on these points? There's a hand up there?
Yes.
Yes,
I think there's something I don't understand in what you're saying.
sure.
What I'm hearing is through Bhakti Yoga and Kirtan, what I'm really doing is I'm giving my attention to something other than self.
Yes.
And that seems to be a distraction.
Okay, good point. Very good question. Or a very good point. Okay, I'll address that. If the truth were dualistic, in other words, what you find is in the Abrahamic religions, they have this like strict separation between God and us. Like we're not like God. I know in Islam you can't even use the same adjectives for us and God because that's blasphemy, even to use the same adjectives. And so you have this idea. I mean, Jesus was accused of one of the main charges against him before Pontius Pilate was that he was claiming, or his followers were claiming, that he was divine. If you're coming from the Indian tradition, you're thinking, well, what's the big deal? I mean, of course we're divine. We're all divine. It's just there's a supreme divine. So if you understand that we are one with God, or we are part of God, the exact word Krishna uses in the Gita, and so therefore, if you're glorifying God, you're actually glorifying yourself, but in an appropriate way. Krishna says in I think chapter 15, Mamai Vamsa Jiva Buddha, Sanatana, eternal living being in this world of life. Eternal living being is my Angsha. Angsha means a part of something. It's not identical, it's not the whole thing, but it's part of it. So for the examples are given, there's two examples that are actually given in ancient Sanskrit texts like the Bhagavatam. If you water the root of the tree, yatha taror mula nisheshanena, just as by watering the root of the tree, you're actually satisfying the whole tree, the branches, the leaves, the twigs. And so you could say, well, you're giving all the water to the root. What about the rest of the tree? We are watering the whole tree. Another example is given, pranopahara chitendriyana, that just as when you put food into your mouth and then you chew it and it goes into your stomach, you're nourishing your whole body. And so when we satisfy that which we are ultimately part of, we are satisfying ourselves. We're not only not neglecting ourselves, but we are exalting ourselves. We are connecting to the source of our existence, and we are getting back in touch with our highest nature. So otherwise, it can just be selfishness in the name of spirituality. There's that danger. And that's why, frankly, you see so many gurus. I'm not going to mention any names, or I'm not saying all of them, but the number of gurus who actually are a bit vain and end up out of vanity and pride exploiting their followers for money or for sex is it's a very long list. It's a very long list. And the reason is that if one is engaged in spiritual practice, not in a mood of humble service, not in a mood of exalting that which is infinitely greater than me, but which I'm part of. As they say, there's a great old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so, anyway, you want to pursue your point. Go ahead.
Just listening.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, your concern was, it's a valid concern. It's a serious concern. And, but I'd say it is a concern more in sort of the dualistic traditions. Basically, there are dualistic traditions where we are so separate from God and all that, which is not, it's sort of a non-starter. But then people go to the other extreme and say it's all one. Well, not really. Because if it was all one, and you know, there's just one impersonal consciousness, which is God, then where did the material world come from? I mean, there's two right there. There obviously is a material world. True, when we're enlightened, we see that the material world is also somehow within God. But it's not the spiritual world. Like this microphone is not eternal. And my body is not eternal. So if we say it's all one, and that we're all God, which is kind of, it's kind of the wackiest thing a person could say, because how does God have a toothache? How does God, how could God be in all the embarrassing situations we get ourselves into? Why does God cry himself to sleep? Because, not out of compassion for the lost souls, but because he's lonely. I mean, if you say we're all God, you end up with a God who's not worth the name. It's actually ludicrous. The word ludicrous means so absurd that it's comical. So these are two extremes. Complete separation from God, like you can't even say the name of God, or, and all that stuff, that sort of severe dualism. And then you get this monism, which is also doesn't explain anything. How could there be a material world if there's only one thing that's real, and it's this impersonal divinity? Where did this world come from? Yeah, why did I collect baseball cards as a kid? I mean, you can't explain anything. It just doesn't, and that's why, because that idea doesn't explain anything, the people who espouse that always, they kind of resort to this trick and say, well, you can't explain it in words. And it's funny because although they say that, and if you read, like, I remember I was teaching the history of Indian religion at the University of Florida. And so I was reading these books to prepare for the course. And the book was good. It's like a sort of a standard history of Indian philosophy. And he was saying that the people who said that words can't express the truth wrote more books than anybody else. and this kind of like this silly contradiction. When I was an undergraduate at Berkeley, centuries ago, and I had this class in German literature, 20th century German literature translation. And one of the books we read was Siddhartha. And the teacher, who was this sort of good-looking young German guy, professor, getting his, having his thrills in Berkeley, teaching Berkeley, of course. And so he was actually laughing at this book, Siddhartha, because he said, I can't remember, he said, like, on this page, Hermann Hesse, says, he says that it's beyond speech. And he uses words to express that it's beyond words. And then he says it on this page and that page. And so he's kind of laughing at the idea that, I mean, in general, the people that say that, and why should we assume that language is limited? Why should we, it's like someone that's been in a bad relationship and says, I'll never love again. But wait a second, not everyone's a narcissist. Some people are sort of reasonably mentally healthy. And so, it's why, in fact, speech in the Rig Veda, probably the oldest book in any language, there's a very famous verse that says there are 4 parts of speech, and human beings only understand one of them. So speech is vibration. Speech can be mantra. And abhedatva nama namino. There's even a statement in Sanskrit that, and this is I was going to mention, Plato thought about this. Plato kind of thought about everything, but there's one Platonic dialogue where he raises the question, do Greek words for objects like apple or house or body bear a special relationship to the objects they describe? And of course, the reason he was interested in Greek is because the Greek word for foreigner also is a Greek word for barbarian. So, but that question, what is the relationship between objects and the words that name them? And so, abheda twa nama namino in Sanskrit means that there's no difference between God and the name of God. And this idea, so when you're chanting, let's say you're doing kirtan, if you're chanting, names of the absolute, you're not merely referring to something. You're not merely describing something. You're actually directly in contact with something. And the word for contact in Sanskrit is yoga. So when you're doing kirtan, you are actually in an advanced state of yoga because you're directly in touch with the absolute. Directly in touch with the absolute. And it's not only in the Sanskrit literature we find this idea. For example, when I was an undergraduate, this is all this nostalgia about my undergraduate days. Anyway, I was a world religions major at UCLA when I was much younger. And so I wrote an essay for a class I was taking. I wrote a paper on the Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem. And so what I found was very interesting, because I was already practicing bhakti yoga and doing kirtan, is that all the statements about this, it's like planning to build the temple, the actual construction of it, the grand opening, where they're giving balloons to kids and candy and everything. The grand opening of the temple in Jerusalem, what it says everywhere, even later on, the temple's gone, they're remembering it, is that it was a temple to the name of God. It was a name temple, that God lives in the temple as his name, or her name, or their name. So, but it's very interesting, they understood this. And it's also understood in Christianity. There's a college in Massachusetts called Holy Name College. And so this was discovered by Christians, by Jews, by yogis in India, by Sufis. They all discovered this truth that the name of the absolute is the absolute. It's called nama rupa. It's the absolute truth in the form of the name. It doesn't mean God, the absolute is only a name, but that is one of the forms, eternal forms of the absolute. So when you do kirtan, you're in a state of yoga. If you do it sincerely, you're actually in a state of yoga. You're connected. You're directly associated with the absolute truth. And that's why if we do that and with the right attitude, it's, sky's the limit. So any question? Yes, please.
Yeah, question. You used one of my favorite words twice, and why it's so quick. You used the word exalt. I love the word. I mean, there's lots of translations to move heavenward, but I'm really curious what you would share about the word you used twice.
Okay. Exalt. I think the basic meaning is just, to glorify something or to actually raise something to a higher level of existence. I mean, we can exalt God in the sense of praising. We're not going to exalt God and say, hey, God, I'm giving you a promotion here. So, but because ultimately what we really are is exalted, every one of us. Now we're sort of DBA, we're doing business as human bodies. And, but ultimately every one of us is an exalted eternal being. Every one of us is far more beautiful than we can imagine. That whole thing. The original German, by the way, is Spieglein, Spieglein an der Wand. That mirror, mirror on the wall. Anyway, it's originally a German story. So I learned that in German class. So, so whatever we're trying to be in terms of, we all want to be attractive, we all want to be loved. Whatever we're trying to be, we're a million times greater than that. All of us are great, glorious, beautiful, beyond our imagination, if we just turn to our real self. And that's the point. And that's what Kirtan does, because when you are in a real state of yoga, which means you're linked. By the way, we still have the word yoga in English, in words like yoke, like to yoke two things together, or conjugal intimate connection. So when you connect, it's like if you probably just give the example, when you touch fire, you are ignited. So when you touch something which is infinitely pure, you become pure. We don't have to struggle and slave away trying to change our psychology. You know, I tried so hard, but then I did the same stupid thing in that relationship. You know, you don't actually, the thing about, you can see, I went to the school of hard knocks. Anyway, when we actually are in a state of yoga, connected to the absolute, it just burns away our impurities. It removes the covering. The image that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita is that our pure, unlimited consciousness is covered. You don't have to change your consciousness. You don't have to change yourself. We just have to uncover it. And the covering is selfishness, material desire, and we can't really, it's hard to purify ourselves. But Krishna is like, you know, such a deal. Krishna is making this offer that if you just, you know, it's like they said, if everything else fails, read the directions. And so, you know, here we have Krishna saying that I will exalt you. Getting back to your word. I will exalt you. I will lift you above all your troubles. I will lift you to this incredible state of consciousness where you will never suffer again. And you will see beautiful things you could never imagine. And you will know what real love is, not only with God, but with other people. And it's like you can't give the stuff away. Because in this age, people are, it's such a bewildered age that literally Krishna's offering everything you could ever want and things you couldn't even imagine that were available to you, and you can't give it away. But people pay large sums of money for something which is just free floating, not based on any powerful text that's been enlightening people for thousands of years, which has held whole civilizations together. They'd rather have a gimmick. So, yes. Gimmick, yeah.
Were you done with it?
What's that?
Could you talk about faith
Faith.
and the necessity, and does it take a leap of faith?
Yeah, no leaps. You can sort of like casually walk into it. Well, first of all, I'll tell you about what the word shraddha. That's the word that's often translated as faith. There's actually two words which could be translated as faith in Sanskrit. One is astikya, which I'll explain. That means, like, if someone says to you, "Do you believe in God?" and someone says, "Yes," that's astikya, because the Sanskrit word asti, from which we get English, is, German ist, French ist, Spanish ist. That's all German. That's all Sanskrit asti. And so, if you believe like God exists, I believe in God, that's astikya, the word astikya. But if you go beyond belief merely in the existence of something, but you actually believe that I can achieve in this life unlimited happiness, all my heart's desire, I can achieve if I just learn to love the source of my existence, then the word is shraddha, which is actually two words. Shraddha means trust, or putting your heart into something, and dha means placing. So in fact, there's a definition of this word shraddha, which is the more powerful word for faith. We don't merely believe that God exists, but that God is infinitely desirable for me, and I can achieve everything this way. There's this verse, it's sort of in Sanskrit Bengali. In Bengali, where the tradition comes from, there's something called Sadhu Bhasha, which means kind of like the high language. And then there's Cholta Bhasha, kind of street talk. And so there's this Shraddha Sabde, which means by the word Shraddha. Vishwasa Kahe, one is actually saying Vishwasa, which means trust, real trust that you put your life in someone's hand. Shraddha Shraddha Vishwasake Sudhita Nishchay, which itself is a very firm conviction, very literal translation. Sudhita Nishchay, a very firm conviction that Krishna Bhakti Koile, simply by practicing bhakti to Krishna, sarva karma krita hoy, everything will be done in my life. Whatever you actually need to have a super life, love, happiness, understanding, everything you could possibly desire, which is actually worthy of your desire. We're not talking about addictions and bad habits here. We're talking about things which the best part of you desires. When you're at your best, when you're at your wisest, that's what you want. And if you believe that if I can somehow or other, Krishna Bhakti Koile, if I can somehow or other practice this bhakti to Krishna, all your dreams will come true. All your real dreams, not the whims, not the bad habits, not the fetishes, but the real dreams. Those will all come true. Because you can't, can you know something but not believe it? How can you know anything? How can you say, I know 2 and 2 is 4, but I don't believe it? So, the notion of knowing something entails that you actually believe what you know, otherwise you don't know it. And even if because at every moment you have to put your faith somewhere. If you say, I'm agnostic, which actually comes from Sanskrit, that's Sanskrit for ajnani. So if you say, I don't know if there's a God or not, but then we could ask a simple question, do you really believe you don't know? Because you can't really be a genuine agnostic unless you really believe you don't know. And if you really believe you don't know, then you have faith in something. So it's like you breathe in and breathe out. When you exhale, it's got to go somewhere. You don't want to breathe, right in someone's face, but it's got to go somewhere. And so you are. In fact, Krishna makes this powerful statement, which I'm using in this philosophy book I'm writing. That he says, Shraddha Mayoyam Purusha, that you, the living being, are made of faith. You're constituted of faith. Think when you wake up in the morning, if you actually are a night sleeper, when you wake up in the morning and you make a very important decision, namely, you decide to get out of bed. That is a free choice you make because you believe it's in your rational interest not to stay in bed all day. Of course, if, say, God forbid you're sick, then you decide not to get out of bed. At every moment you're choosing, because we have free will, at every moment you are deciding. You decide to come here, you decide to stay, at a certain point it's time to leave. You decide I'm going to drive home and not, drive into the Pacific Ocean, which I actually once did when I was on a date in high school. But I wasn't suicidal. I was just showing off with this girl and I ended up at the call AAA. Anyway, I won't talk about that now. So if you think about it, at every moment we're exercising free will. Because even if you say, well, I'm not choosing anything, you're choosing not to choose anything. You, as an eternal person, at every moment are making some choice or other. And that means at every moment you're exercising your free will, you're putting your faith in something. So you are made of faith. To live a human life means to constantly be choosing things. And as Krishna says, you can choose nivrita. You can choose not to enter. You can choose to enter. You can go in and stay outside. At every moment, you cannot live life without choosing, without exercising, because just like you breathe all the time, you're exercising free will all the time. And so therefore we have to take inventory and say, well, what am I putting my faith in? The same nonsense that has just, made me frustrated and lonely. What am I actually trusting? And so yoga, bhakti yoga, just means we finally figure out who's trustworthy. What is in my rational self-interest? Thanks. Anything else I can help you with? News, weather, sports? No, we don't want news right now. Definitely don't want news right now. So, anything else?
Quick question.
Yes.
You use the word art, the phrase art is everywhere. So
Yes.
you define art as beauty.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, well, I would go to my critique of 20th century art and why the Guernica is actually a terrible painting, but Picasso. Yeah, there is art everywhere. There's beauty everywhere if we have the eyes to see it. So thank you all very much. Now we'll do maybe another kirtan after all that. If you're still breathing, if you're still alive after all that.
Maybe we could just stand up and stretch for a moment.
Yeah, please, this is your question.
Maybe we could just stand up and stretch for a moment. As we
And
get into
sorry,
this.
Dave, do you have a book coming out soon?
Well, great bards, yes.
Yeah.
Can we hear that?
Yeah, actually, I have a book coming out. It's a historical reconstruction of art that's been published by Simon and Schuster. And, yeah, a month or two.
A month or two?
How do we pre-order?
What's that?
Can we pre-order?
Kumi's my agent.
Hey, Dylan. How are you?
Let's, okay, so as we get
What
into this
time
last
is it?
kirtan, maybe are you guys open to trying something crazy?
What time does it
Say
end?
yes.
Whatever.
Okay, so
We're gonna
we
do
can
a short
try
kirtan.
these
We're gonna do a little kirtan.
beautiful and eloquent points that we just learned. Like, what would it be like to actually give our full attention, give our full faith into these mantras and see what happens? Worst case scenario is you feel a little bit better. Mind feels a little freer. Best case scenario, some magic happens. Sounds good? Rock on. Sounds great. All right, cool. So maybe while we're standing, let's try our mudra arm again. Put our hands up. What we do with our arms and our body change our mind. Just like if we do Anjali, let's say hi to your neighbor. Howdy. Howdy. Feels good. Yes? Very good. Let me just try another mudra. Put your hands up like this. Now go like this and say what's up now.
What's up, pal?
You got a problem?
Come
Doesn't feel so good, right?
Come
It's the same way we use our antenna arms. We feel divine sound here.
Don't mess with
So as we go into this
my
last time, I mean, raise your hand if you like to dance. Oh, okay, everyone. So what might happen is something, the boogie kicks in. You'll start by singing and you start swaying, and before you know it, you see some other people might stand up and sway or even dancing. Only because you insisted, I'll teach you a quick little dance move in case the boogie kicks in towards the end of this kirtan. Sound fair? All right, pay very close attention. It's very complicated. Put your hands up, you ready? Okay, left foot in front of right, and back. Right in front of left, back. And I keep going. This is called the Swami two-step. So in case as you're chanting, if something happens internally and you're feeling that inspiration, I encourage you, what would it be like to stand up and chant and also get the body into it? Usually the yogi is still, watch what happens when you actually get the body into it. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. Maybe we can scoot in one last couple inches for this last kirtan here. And let's try to apply what we just learned before we close up the evening. You can see why I changed my life 15 years ago, right? Okay, so again, to see what happens, I will just do the simple C, F. Let's try the Maha Mantra again. Raise your hand if you haven't memorized the one that's on the card. 1, 2. All right, yeah. Yeah, so I don't have to explain much. So let's do this again and again. Do it in such a way. Let's try this. It's fun. True or false? Kirtan's fun. Very fun. But what happened if it's more than fun? We fun plus, which means let's allow something internal to happen. Like let's chant in such a way that our life changes. Is it possible?
It's possible.
Very possible. Let's try it. Let's give it an earnest attempt. Really trying to give our full attention to the mantra. Sound good? Let's take a deep breath into the nose. Out through the mouth. Another one, much bigger than that. All the way in. Deepest breath of the day. Fully sigh, release it out. One last one. All the way in. Hold it at the top. Take an extra step. One more. One more. Audibly out. Ah. Please keep bringing your mind back to the mantra. Sing it very loudly. I chant it, you chant it, I chant it, you chant it. We go back and forth. Please try to hear the sincerity in your heart. Try to hear all the syllables. Watch it. Here's what it says. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare. Hare Rama. Hare Rama. Rama Rama. Hare Hare. Let's take a deep breath, nice and loud. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare. Hare Rama. Hare Rama. more like a lot louder from your heart. Sing louder than the mind. Let's do everything again. Much love. From the bottom of your heart. One more time, one more time. Your face is there. That's it. Let's hear everyone again. Everyone again. Let's go. Again. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Let's go. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Keep it going, keep going. About 60 seconds to lose your mind. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. One last one, please. If your mind wandered, no problem. But this last one, please pay attention to every syllable. Try to hear the sincerity in your voice. Try to give it from the bottom of your heart, your full focus on the mantra. Take a deep breath. Sing with me one last time. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. That's nice. Hare Rama, Hare Thank you for coming and dedicating your attention to sacred sound. The damage has been done, there's no taking it back. And we feel an overwhelming abundance for H.D.Goswami for taking his time to come enlighten us with the wisdom that he shared. Not only is he well sought out in pretty much every country in the world, anyone would be grateful to have him, and he travels extensively, and we feel so blessed that he's willing to come and gift us with his presence, with his knowledge. I highly encourage you not only read some of the literatures that he's came out with or translated for us, but to whatever extent you stay in touch with him, I assure you, and I can speak from personal experience, your life will be improved. And my only request is that if you enjoy what you hear from him, please, your responsibility is to share it with someone else. Share the goodness. And in this way, life becomes more and more beautiful day by day. Thank you for letting us serve.
Thank you, Madhu. Thank you. Kirtan and Gay, let's pick up our music.
How can we serve Veda best?
Just keep coming. Thank you for traveling such a long distance to be here. It's very special.
Great to see you. Happy you guys came out. Oh, well, then I'll just say in this case, if you appreciate this space, it's a sacred space. It's kind of whatever you can do to contribute, and really what that means is you vote with your feet. Just show up. Just show up and share some mantras and bring a friend to the Kirtan, because Veda if Kumi wanted to, she could make it a whole profitable business of sorts with Kirtan, but rather she just opens up her doors to just allow sacred sound vibrations and amazing guests like H.D.Goswami. We're so grateful for you. So if you have questions for him, maybe we can share his the way to contact him, because I encourage you to stay in touch. Thank you, everyone.
We also have some rice modal and chana masala in the lobby, so if your bellies need filling, feel free to
Don't
grab some
threaten me
before
with
you
a
go.
good time. Make a friend tonight before you leave.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Still recording.
I think so. Kumi, I should end the recording, right?
Yeah. I don't know how to end it.